Will apartments built between 1991 and 2013 in Ireland become more valuable overnight? And I'm not talking about the CSO stats that came out this week, where the National Residential Price Index increased by 8.6% for the last 12 months up to November 2022. Prices in Dublin increased by 7% and prices outside of Dublin increased by 9.8%. And I'm also not referring to the fact that houses for sale in Dublin currently only stand at 3,863, which is a 36.5% reduction on last month. I'm referring to the government's plan to remedy defects in up to 100,000 apartments.
Funded scheme to repair up to 100,000 defective homes built during the Celtic Tiger era. The Housing Minister said the fund will cover apartments and duplexes constructed between 1991 and 2013. The overall scheme could cost up to €2.5 billion.
The scheme will cover the remedy costs for fire, structural safety and water egress problems in apartments and duplexes throughout the country. It is estimated that there's approximately 100,000 units that are affected by defects, and the average remedy cost is roughly about 25,000 per unit, totaling 2.5 billion. From the apartment blocks that I've seen or dealt with in the past, I would say that that's quite a low estimate at 25,000 per unit. Also, the amount of professional fees that have been racked up over the last few years trying to deal with this problem is mounting all the time. It also has been reported that apartment blocks and owners that have already paid for work for these defects will be able to recover their costs, which is very good news for these apartment owners because they've already gone through hell to fix the problems already. How the scheme is going to be managed hasn't really been reported yet. The only early indications is that the funds will go directly to the owners' management companies and they'll be able to direct funds rather than the funds going directly to apartment owners. But this opens more questions than answers because some are suggesting that the redress will not be available for landlords and will only apply for owner-occupiers. I'm not quite sure how apartment management companies are going to be able to manage that. If they have to do works to an entire block, how are they going to single out the apartments that are owned by landlords? Apartments that are owned by landlords will have to be included in the works for those defects. Otherwise, there's no point in actually doing the work if some apartments are left out. If there's 100 apartments in one block and 20 of them happen to be rented, the management company can't fix all the structural defects within that block if they are excluding 20 apartments that happen to be rented out. So it will be interesting to see how this one is managed, one on the ground and also from a PR and voting angle as well.
A levy imposed on the construction industry, on the property developers to pay for what they did.
It will cause problems for people who have already sold and have had to take major price reductions because of those defects. Will there be any compensation for those people? Also, some owners went ahead and fixed internal issues, so they were able to sell their apartments. They still probably took a decent discount on that sale, and it's likely that they won't be able to recover the cost of their work either. While the people who have sold will likely probably miss out in most cases, the major benefits of this scheme will be people who have bought the apartments at discounted prices, and many of those will be cash buyers because no mortgages were available on these properties that had major defects. It also means that all these defective properties are valued far more today than they were yesterday. The minimum increase of 25,000 per apartment might only be the tip of the iceberg because there was many more reasons why these apartments were sold at such heavy discounts, sometimes 50 or 100,000 or even more compared to neighbouring blocks that didn't have any defects. The discounted prices on these sales weren't solely based on the cost of the remedial works per apartment because in a lot of cases those were known. And even if they weren't known, or perhaps not all the costs were known, the discounts were far greater than this because the unknowns were, will every apartment owner have the ability to pay for all of the works, or will some apartment owners just flat out refuse to pay, i.e. delaying works, and works may never actually happen? How long is it going to take for the works to be funded and the defects to be fixed? And generally, even more importantly, in terms of the discounts that were available, only cash buyers were able to buy a lot of these apartments because mortgages weren't available, and therefore the buyer pool was quite limited, and therefore the prices achieved for these apartments that have defects were quite considerably lower than neighbouring blocks that didn't. All of these questions are issues that have just raised, buyers were concerned about when buying these apartments. All of those issues now are going to just disappear. And therefore, these apartments become more valuable overnight. I think there are some opportunities out there, and I think some savvy investors will look at some of these apartment blocks to see if there's opportunities to buy them at discounts at the moment, because it will take a little bit of time for those price corrections to happen, and some investors may actually gain quite substantial capital gains over the next few years. Overall, I think this is a good thing for the owners. They really did need some support from the government. But again, this is being funded by the taxpayer, which many of the owners are taxpayers, but they did need some support. But I'm surprised that they got such a blanket guarantee.
The costs of this scheme will be fully borne by the state.
Perhaps giving such a blank check is a way to get some support for the government and get some votes, because there are 100,000 owners and more people affected by it. So perhaps it is a strong way to gain some support and gain some votes. But I would say fair play to all the people who've worked tirelessly on this issue for the last number of years. A lot of hard work has been put in by some owners, and a lot of property professionals have been working on this for years. I know some people have been working on this for 7+ years. It's a task that I wouldn't have enjoyed doing. So a lot of credit has to go to those professionals, property professionals within the industry who have worked tirelessly to get support for these owners. I'm surprised that they managed to get such a blanket guarantee. I would have expected interest-free loans back to the owner management companies to fix all the issues, and the owners perhaps would have received some sort of income tax credit over a period of time, which would cover off their service charge payments for the next few years while that work was actually taking place. Many people will ask, why aren't developers, engineers, insurance companies not paying for this? And why is the taxpayer paying for this?
As to whether developers and builders should pay, the minister conceded today that many are no longer in business, but he said they had a moral responsibility to contribute.
Well, most of the developers that were involved in this scheme are long gone. NAMA ate them all up. The engineers only really certified what they could see, and many of these issues are behind walls. There's also issues in regards to how long their cover actually lasts from an insurance point of view, or how long their certs last, which is generally 7 years, and we're long past that for some of the older blocks, because a lot of the issues were only discovered after perhaps 2013. We also have to deal with issues with home bond, which in my mind is a worthless piece of paper and is just a marketing tool. You have insurance companies. The insurance companies won't take responsibility if the developers did something wrong. You have the block insurance companies, which will not take responsibility for any issues within the apartments. Part of the issue was that every scheme or every block was fighting for themselves, and the insurance companies had mountains of solicitors fighting their corner. Hopefully the mistakes of the past won't repeat themselves. Generally they always do, but I believe tech could play a big part to make sure that they actually don't. Councils need to take more of a role in terms of supervising construction, and I don't believe it's that hard for them to do. Or perhaps each council might only need 1 or 2 staff. Perhaps Dublin, etc., needs a little bit more in terms of monitoring the construction that's happening in each council, and it wouldn't cost them a huge amount, or wouldn't cost the government a huge amount to supervise each construction site. It would cost them far less than what they're about to hand out in the 2.5 billion to make sure mistakes like this don't happen again. A simple solution for monitoring is one of those scanning robot dogs. Each council could have one. They could show up on site every single week, walk around, scan everything, map everything in terms of construction that's actually happening in real time. Programs could be developed to spot any missing fire stopping or potential leaks that might happen in the future. I've seen these robot dogs scan a room in a few seconds. It wouldn't take long for them to walk around a building and build a detailed 3D model of any new building and spot any real-time issues. An AI program could be developed to spot any potential construction issues in terms of any fire stop missing, screws missing, waterproof dampening missing. All these things could probably be built into an AI tool to spot them as the dog is walking around and flag them to someone in the council or someone in the construction team. This perhaps is a business opportunity, but I think something the government could easily invest in, because it will save them far more to make sure these mistakes don't happen again in the future. And what I'm talking about is not something far into the future. International construction companies have been using these robot dogs to scan sites since probably 2020. I won't hold my breath on this, but perhaps some forward thinking can be applied by the government. It's a very simple business case. Buy a few of these robot dogs to monitor all new construction, or risk having to pay out another 2.5 billion in the future